Welcome back to Behind the Bar. It is day 16 of the trial against Sean Diddy Combs. Prosecutors today, Derek, called a witness previously identified as one of the named victims in the case, or I'm sorry, the unnamed victims in the case. She testified seemingly to what we've heard all along, basically that he treated her monstrously, largely yesterday, and then today she suffered through a long and hard cross-examination.
That's exactly right. You're referring to the witness who is going by the name Mia. She is one of the anonymous alleged victims in the criminal indictment, and she's a big witness. This is her second day on the stand, so they have a lot of testimony that they're trying to elicit from her. Much of the day was spent still with prosecutors on direct, where they were asking her questions about, the allegations of sexual assault that she's made against Diddy. There are multiple instances, according to her, where he sexually assaulted her, once at the first time at his 40th birthday party, and then subsequent instances where she continued to work for him.
And just to maybe put too fine a point on it, the allegations of sexual assault that she's making against Diddy are horrific.
Yes.
Like we're talking full-fledged rape here. We're talking begging him not to have sex with her. He did against her will.
These are not harassment, in the office, groping kind of allegations. This is
sexual assault. Yeah.
So she has made these allegations, and during the course of the testimony, a big issue that came up was when she ended her time as an employee of Bad Boy Records and an assistant to Diddy. She said that she then lawyered up. She hired an employment lawyer who she said there were some back bonuses owed to her, maybe some out-of-pocket expenses that weren't reimbursed. But this attorney made, according to Mia's testimony, a $10 million demand on Diddy. Now,
why is that amount so important?
That amount is important because for an employee of her salary range, this is not just for her back bonuses and back pay and overtime and out-of-pocket expenses. It clearly meant more. However, the prosecutors asked her, did you raise, during the course of these negotiations with Bad Boy over a settlement, did you raise the allegations of sexual assault? She was very clear. She said, no, I was going to take this with me until I died. So she said that I made this $10 million demand. They ultimately settled for around $400,000. She says she got $200,000. Her lawyers got $200,000. So there was a large gap between what she asked for and what she ended up receiving, according to her testimony. And the question then becomes, well, in the juror's mind, why didn't you bring up the sexual assault? That's a big bullet that you can fire in a negotiation setting to say, hey, you better pay me because I've got all of these nasty allegations about you. The prosecutors got out in front of this by asking her rather than letting this come out on cross. And we wanted to bring up what that dynamic and why that was done. Do you have a sense?
Well, I can speculate, but I'm not a criminal. I've never been a criminal lawyer.
But we have one. We have one.
Kirsten Brown Neal, thanks again for joining us. Always great to have you with us. So how does this play to the jury? They learned that she obviously suffered from some horrific abuse, according to the testimony, and it's so consistent with what we've heard otherwise. I think it's hard for the jury to not believe her as a credible person who actually did suffer at his hands. But nevertheless, she makes a $10 million demand. She ends up settling for herself $200,000, an attorney $200,000 as well. Big delta between what was asked for. And she claims she never brought up the sexual assault during the negotiations. And does that mean that maybe she's overstating it now? How does the jury take that? And then how does the jury take just generally when people go after their alleged abusers for this kind of money?
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me back.
I know, such a light topic to start off on.
I know, like, let's get into it. Witness credibility. Jurors don't like when there is a civil case involved, and I do think it hits right at someone's credibility and potential motive to lie. And it's interesting because there is a similar tract between her and Cassie in terms of the abuse they're alleging, civil suits filed, and settlements. Cassie got a significant settlement, right? Like, there's no reason for her to be talking about this at this point other than wanting justice through the criminal justice system. Whereas Mia got significantly less, as you said, Derek, than what she demanded, and then failed to mention all of the claims. Now, there could be a lot of reasons behind that. It is humiliating to have to talk about, this type of abuse. And I think because there's so many other people saying the same things about Diddy, I think the jury isn't likely to dismiss it entirely, but it might cloud her testimony a bit, as in perhaps does she have vendetta is too strong of a word, but does she feel like she wasn't adequately compensated for what she went through based on her civil case? So maybe now she's coming forward now. But honestly, guys, there's nothing to be gained. She's not getting any more money out of this. She's obviously hoping to remain anonymous because she's testifying under a pseudonym. So I don't know that even, a quote unquote revenge motive is really enough for the kind of smoke she could, potentially be facing if it's found out who she
To
is.
me,
And the internet is going to internet and will probably out her.
To me, this is the key. I agree with you entirely, basically. And I would also add that when she left her employment and she made the $10 million demand, there's a million reasons not to raise the sexual assault claims. There just are. She could feel re-traumatized. She could feel humiliated. She's not under any compunction. It's not compulsory for her to raise those. She could go into that room and say, I want $10 million and I think you should pay me because you, Diddy, know what you did to me and this seems like a fair resolution. Now that she's been called to testify, there's a risk of perjury if she lies on the stand about these things. There is, she gains nothing. There's no financial motive. I tend to believe witnesses and people who come into court and testify to these horrific things because there's no reason to lie. They can get in trouble. She could get in real trouble on this if you lie on the stand to a jury.
But he has been accused by.
And this is pure
speculation.
No,
that's right. Go ahead, Kirsten.
This pure speculation, but her attorney also could have suggested that she don't include those allegations, because how might Diddy respond to that? It is very different to be being accused of sexual assault and physical abuse and not paying overtime. And does the lawsuit land better, with the Combs Enterprises, with just work-related type issues that didn't even make the media, like we're all just finding out about this? Versus how salacious would it have been to say, he raped me, he physically abused me, he was verbally abusive, so it could have been a legal strategic decision, but that's just pure speculation on my part.
The other thing I want to bring up about this, we shouldn't envision Mia and Diddy sitting across the table from one another with their lawyers on either side. This is going to have done an arm's length transaction, lawyers over the phone, probably never even meeting in person, maybe one meeting between a counsel. The two parties, I doubt that she would have ever wanted to be in a room with him, so I can't imagine that happened. And so these are salvos being fired at long range against one another, and I just think it gives a different sort of feeling for why it is you don't bring it up. You have your lawyer. By the way, the $10 million number to me is a wink and a nod at what Diddy knows happened, right?
Right.
That number's so big. You're saying to him, look, this
I got
is
the goods on
basically
you.
a hush money payment because I have the goods on you. The fact he only paid $400,000. Apparently, we know that he felt he was untouchable. We know he felt he was impervious to any claims against him. Say what you want. I don't care. You can't prove it. And in the meantime, I'm just not going to pay you more.
Let me play devil's advocate for a second. As a juror sitting there, when you hear that she made the $10 million demand, those initial salvos are always huge. You never think you're going to land at $10 million when you ask for $10 million.
Yep.
But she did walk for a very small amount relative to the $10 million. So that has to plant, if you're a skilled defense attorney, and on cross they haven't raised this particular issue, but she will be back on Monday, and I suspect it will come up. Why did she walk for so little? And is it fair to ask her, well, you asked for $10 million, maybe you hope to land at $5 million, but you landed at $2 million. You got $200,000 off a claim where you said you were subjected to vicious abuse, computers thrown at you, turkey meat thrown at you, multiple instances of sexual assault, and you walked away for $200,000, which could be back bonuses. How does that square? And how far will the defense push this narrative with someone who is a tearful victim wanting to be anonymous in front of a jury? This is a sympathetic person on the stand in a lot of ways, and I think they have to be careful, but they've, to this point, been pretty forceful as well with her, different than Cassie.
And it's interesting, and maybe because the optics of doing that with Cassie didn't work, you pick a different victim to push a little bit harder. Part of this settlement could have been too a non-disparagement agreement, that she wouldn't disparage Diddy publicly beyond this, and he wouldn't disparage her. Because remember, was it Christina? Not Christina. Who's the Capricorn, yes, I'm sorry.
Clark, yeah.
Said that she couldn't get a job when she left Diddy. And so maybe Mia's thinking about future, job prospects. And I walk away for, again, by $10 million standards, a relatively small amount, but, you know, maybe I get a recommendation, or maybe he doesn't, you know, overtly disparage me or keep me from being employed in the industry.
That's a good point. I mean, she may have wanted to put it behind her and continue working in the industry she loved.
So let's transition
Right.
here. Kirsten, we have you here, longtime prosecutor. We want to get into this issue of RICO. I think the first 3 weeks of the case are now over. And one of the big questions is, how are prosecutors going to try and establish their RICO case against Diddy? We understand the sex trafficking case, very straightforward. We understand this idea of coercion, of convincing, of cajoling Cassie into committing these sex acts and taking part of these freak-offs. But far more difficult, both legally and from a factual standpoint, is how are they trying to get their RICO case proven? What have you seen? What are the prosecutors trying to aim at? And what do you anticipate from the defense on this?
Well, in a very simplistic way, what they have to prove with RICO is that there was a criminal enterprise, there was multiple people, at least 2 from the criminal enterprise, doing a pattern or cumulative behavior of racketeering activity. And then there is a federal statute that lays out all of the different type of activities that count under racketeering. And I mean, the list is lengthy, and they only have to prove 2 of them that happened within a 10-year period. Some of those include bribery, I believe extortion is in there, sex trafficking, arson, witness tampering. And in the indictment, they laid out 8 or 9 different predicate acts, if you will, that fall under RICO, all of which have been touched on at this point. I mean, I think the prosecution, and clearly they have weeks to go, is far from fully making their case, but they seem to be well on the path, and they are hitting and have hit at least 2 of those predicate acts that make up racketeering. You know, it sounds like a complicated case, and Jason, like you were saying, like, you know, we usually think about the mob and that type of thing, but when you look at the jury instructions, and that's the elements of the crime that the judge is going to give the jury, there's about 4 or 5 elements, and you look at that, and the prosecution is very close to being able to close the loop on those elements.
I think you're right. And I think some of the hang up people have when they look at the RICO case is this. I'll sort of set it out like this. When I think of RICO and Diddy, I would think he was the head of Bad Boy Records. How did he deploy crimes, arson, bribery, extortion, to the benefit of that enterprise? How did he run Bad Boy? Did he put a gun to artists' heads and say, sign this contract which hands over all the royalties? Or, you know, go to Suge and say, you know, give me this artist and send him over to Bad Boy, or else I'll slash your tires or light your car on fire. That doesn't seem to be the case they're making. Rather,
Right.
It looks like Diddy was the head of Bad Boy Records, which was run largely as a legitimate enterprise, a record label, and then was also an extremely jealous boyfriend who torched, you know, romantic rivals' cars like Kid Cudi. That had nothing to do with Bad Boy Records. He wasn't trying to sign him as an artist. He was very upset with Cassie's parents at times because he thought Cassie was cheating. And I think the disconnect for some people, including Harvey, has struggled with this, is how does that constitute a criminal enterprise? He's not trying to profit from it. He's just a freak. He likes freak-offs, and he has these personal consumptive habits that are odd.
Kirsten, before you respond, I think what you're saying is really a good point. What they've laid out is a lot of predicate acts,
Yes.
but towards what collective goal? The goal seems to be the predicate acts, the sex trafficking, the arson itself, the jealous boyfriend stuff, but those aren't the underlying criminal enterprise. Those are the predicate acts that
He wasn't running a sex ring for like profit. He wasn't trafficking individuals, and that's the way he was making money. He just liked freak-offs for his own ends.
Kirsten, what you got?
Derek, you're right. There's clearly, you know, legitimate businesses, multiple businesses he was running. We heard the records, we drank the vodka, we wore the clothes. So we know all of the legitimate things that the Combs enterprise was doing, but he was also using some of those same employees to set up the freak-offs, clean up after the freak-offs, using company money to pay for the freak-offs, and company employees to kind of perpetuate what it is that he wanted to achieve in his personal life. And now I think you're right, though, the prosecution really is going to have to link up how is what he's doing personally different from how he's running his business. But that intersection seems to be the number of people who worked for the business that he also had essentially doing his dirt.
I think you're right.
While they were also doing legitimate business practices, and having his former assistants testify really speaks to that. I'm sure everything they did wasn't turning lotion bottles around and setting up lubricant, but it certainly seemed to be part of like the regular course of what they were doing. It wasn't one-offs. This was activities that were happening for years.
Right. One of the things we heard recently, the timing of this trial. So prosecutors again have been on for 3 weeks. They're estimating another 3 weeks after that, and then we heard from the defense they may put on a 3-week defense, which seems like a really long time for the defense. What witnesses do they legitimately have here?
That is really long. And just to contrast that a little bit, the Karen Reed trial is happening right now. And that's a murder trial. And the prosecution just rested after, I think, 23 days or so. And the defense has said they could call as many as 90 witnesses, but they're estimating 1 week to 1.5 weeks, 2 weeks tops.
Wow.
To put their case on, and that they plan for their case to be much more sort of expert driven and more robust than the first trial. So they plan to do all that in as little as a week and a half on a murder. So it's
Karen Reed's case is, I'm innocent. I didn't kill this guy.
Yeah.
Diddy's case is very different.
No concession.
Yeah, he's admitting
Yeah, what
essentially.
is the fact witness we're talking about here? This is going to obviously they need experts, right, to counter the prosecution's experts. The one expert we've heard of is somebody who said that basically a lot of women get involved in situations where they don't feel they can leave, notwithstanding the physical freedom to leave. The emotional freedom is not there.
But employees who had happy experiences at Bad Boy are useless to the defense's case.
Yes.
Right? Because if he had a bunch of personal assistants doing the freak offs, but then he also had some record guys in suits, that doesn't help him in any way to bring those people in and say, I worked at Bad Boy and had a perfectly pleasant experience.
But they're probably going to trot them out and put on, what'll essentially be character witnesses to talk about, the non-toxic work environment or how wonderful of a guy he was. And at the end, I expect the prosecution to say yes, and there are probably a number, if not hundreds of thousands, given this man's profile, of people who can say they had a wonderful experience working for or being in association with or in the presence of Diddy. But clearly we've heard from people who had completely different criminal experience working for him or being in a relationship with him. And both of those things can be true. His culpability isn't limited because he got along with some people in the company.
I got to say, I agree with you.
Them.
It seems to be a mistake to me. They should cross hard and they should attack and put holes in the prosecution's case, but to present a long list of your own witnesses.
What about people to muddy up Cassie?
What if Diddy's testifying?
No, impossible.
Oh, can you imagine? Do you think he'll get on the stand? I got to ask you, is there any chance in your mind?
The greatest thing in the world.
My gut instinct says no. However, when you were dealing with domestic violence, and there's a lot, it's not a domestic violence case, but there's a lot of domestic violence alleged, sex crimes alleged, a personality type of those kind of offenders is usually pretty narcissistic. And a narcissist thinks that they can explain their way out of most things. And he is a rich and powerful, and I'm not diagnosing anybody, but someone who has narcissistic tendencies. So he might very well think, I can get on the stand and explain all of this away. Just give me a chance.
Good
and maybe
God.
It's,
well, for our podcast, I certainly hope you're right.
I know it would be fascinating, but he has very, very good lawyers who are probably going to heavily advise against it, but it's his choice. And the judge will ask him directly. So even if his attorneys say, don't do it, when the judge says, Mr. Combs, would you like to waive your right to testify in open court, not in front of the jury, but in open court, he has the opportunity to answer that question, not his lawyers.
It's such a good point. And you're right. He might think, I could turn on the charm. I've been eyeing these jurors. I see ones that are looking at me in the eye during the trial, and I want to talk to them.
I got to tell you, 5 minutes of mock cross-examination by one of his skilled lawyers. So Diddy
should chasten him.
Should chasten him, because I could cross-examine Diddy and make him feel really bad about himself. Just play that video over and over again. What were you thinking exactly here when you landed your foot in the back of her head?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But think about it. I mean, a narcissist truly might think, I can charm them. You lawyers don't know as much as me. Remember when Alec Baldwin did that interview?
Yes.
And it sounded like he was in control. And we were thinking, why would his lawyer let him give that interview? Because Alec Baldwin said, I'm giving a fucking interview.
Right,
yeah.
exactly.
And you're not going to stop me, suit.
Right.
All right, Kirsten, thank you so much.
I mean, a lot of people,
please, more. Yes, we'll take it all.
A lot of people give ill-advised interviews or testify, and it rarely goes well. But we will see.
We will
Stay
see.
tuned.
And if he gets up there, promise you'll come back on this podcast.
Oh, I mean, you guys won't be able to keep me off.
Perfect. Perfect. All right, Kirsten, thank you so much. Kirsten Brown-Neal, thanks for joining the podcast. And we'll see everybody on Monday. See you guys.
See ya.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Thank you. That was perfection.
Yeah.
Perfection. Really
Thanks,
good.
guys.